I've long been a fan of 4X and strategy games. In fact, Civilization 2 was one of the first video games I ever played. So you could say I have a bit of a history with the genre. And yes, I'm old, but no, I didn't play Civ 2 right when it came out. I got it on sale a few years later at some sort of bargain bin. Maybe it was Walmart, Staples, GameStop. I have no idea where. It was a long time ago. But I picked it up and I've been playing grand strategy games ever since, including Stellaris. So I was pleasantly surprised to find a demo for Stellaris Nexus, a new Stellaris title. Sort of. Now, my impression of the previous Stellaris games is, much like the Endless series, they're a little bit more focused on storytelling rather than just raw gameplay mechanics. It's true that Civilization paints the picture of a grand empire, and Master of Orion has great ship combat. But this feels a little bit more like telling the story of a people, though without some of the slightly heavy-handed control that you see in the Endless series. That reminds me, I should definitely be talking about the Endless series at some point, so get subscribed if you have any interest in seeing that upload. Maybe leave a like while you're down there. But before I get into things, a special thanks to my patrons and channel members for their continued support. More about that at the end. But for now, what are my first impressions of a Stellaris Nexus demo? I began where most people would, the tutorial, and immediately realized that compared to a lot of other recently released 4X titles, Stellaris feels very modernized. Not necessarily in the everyone has no attention span, so we're going on TikTok sort of way, but in the people have a full-time job and might not have the time for a full 6 or 8 hour game, but a 2-hour session is absolutely great, and a 40-minute game isn't bad either. So, a lot of the traditional systems that have you build up a massive empire and then manage it are streamlined through the Edict system. Edicts are kind of like your action economy in Dungeons & Dragons or Pathfinder. You have your standard action, move action, swift action. I know there are some variations between different editions and tabletop rule sets, but in short, you have an action economy and you can only do things within that economy. These edicts determine the greater effects you have on your empire within a given turn. So if you want to interact with another civ via diplomacy, that's an edict. If you want to send out or receive a trade request, that's an edict. Want to build something on your planet, maybe expand your total fleet capacity, that's an edict. Or you can always use politics as a jack of all trade. Much like a leader, you need to choose your actions carefully, which does a really good job of making me feel more like a leader of this civilization rather than a pseudo-omniscient entity that's observing it from afar. The other system that makes it feel a little bit more tactical and prevents your empire from becoming unwieldy is the population support system. This is a resource that isn't quite universal among all the different races, but essentially it's another type of action economy. You spend 1 population support for your first action, 2 for the second, so on and so forth. Edicts often cost more. Certain sub-actions within things, such as having a ship target this specific enemy instead of letting combat resolve automatically, also cost more actions. This means more complex turns require you to build up your empire to allow you to play the more complex turns, rather than naturally coming from having 20 different cities, each of which has a build queue, a bunch of units to move, diplomacy to take care of, trade to manage, and workers to also do something with, because for whatever reason, workers in 4X games are just terrible at handling their own affairs. I mean, if handymen, plumbers, carpenters, road workers were as incompetent in the real world, then you wouldn't be able to go outside without stepping in a pothole, your house would probably collapse on you, and running water would be considered a miracle. Then you also have your capacity style resources. These are your troop power, armament things, fleet capacity, whatever you want to call it, and research. You don't really expend these resources, they're just taken up temporarily as you build and improve your empire. The other resource that's spent is production. Need to build a ship? That costs production. Need to build a building? That may cost production. And of course, you can generate that by mining, building factories, all the sorts of stuff that you would expect from a 4X game. However, the 2 types of resources and 2 classifications of each kind of all combines to make the game feel a lot more interactive than many previous 4X titles. Or at the very least, it's something fresh and different, which I don't see all that often. Now, another big change is the game's moved fully to turn-based from Stellaris' real-time with pause, which I also think is a good choice for a faster paced game like this. Having real time with pause means that some people are going to be taking turns at different rates than others, and you have to work into that system in some way that doesn't feel awkward. Now, I know technically it's not a true real-time strategy game, not in the way that Age of Empires is. However, the more real-time nature of Stellaris did mean there's always that pressure to take additional actions, and during longer games that could get stressful as you continue to manage your empire. Whereas, with Stellaris Nexus, the games are about 40 or 50 minutes each from my experience, and you're not under that pressure. So you get to step back and think, maybe breathe a bit, not that that means it's easy. Because the goal isn't to send some sort of spaceship through a wormhole. It's not to crush all of your enemies with extreme prejudice. In fact, you have to win by essentially becoming the galactic president, a popularity contest that's in part based on your ability to conduct diplomacy to curry favor from nearby races, and in part based on your ability to expand your empire to the point where you dominate certain scores. These are kind of civic measures of, oh, this person has the most production. So if everyone votes that production is something the galaxy as a intergalactic society or galactic society values, your empire is going to curry more favor and naturally be more desirable. In this sense, you're always thinking of victory, not purely from a singular goal, but by building up multiple aspects of your empire. You're using your diplomacy to get votes, you're potentially giving your own votes away to someone who isn't a threat to you, or maybe to an ally that you want to win the game instead. And it's not all about just being a warmonger. In fact, just being a warmonger seems quite difficult due to the relatively short nature of the game. As you fight a bunch of people, the penalties stack up. Now, in my very first game, I got absolutely annihilated. In my second game and third game, I did much better. None of these were wins, though I'm sure I can get a win soon because I did end up placing third. And I also learned quite quickly that if you can't win the galactic vote fairly, then you should seek to win it unfairly by using tactics known as espionage. This is another set of actions you can use to disrupt enemy planets, steal technologies, and much, much more. Use espionage to position yourself for victory, or prevent someone who's in number one place from actually winning, because if one of their top planets happens to defect and happens to take all of its production with it, they may no longer be the most productive empire in the known galaxy. There's also several small features which, on their own, wouldn't really feel impactful, but taken in totality, help to make Stellaris Nexus feel fresh and new. First up, there's no more colony ship stuff. Any ship can colonize anything, but the power of your fleet determines the class of planet you can colonize. Stronger planets are harder. Starbases are an addition to your planet that function as a shipyard, kind of the same as before. Ships themselves follow a rock, paper, scissors system where you have capital ships, raiders, and carriers. Carriers provide long-range fire support, raiders are fast and agile, and capital ships blast stuff. This works quite well and makes combat both simple and approachable, while also being a little bit more complex because you can use support actions. Again, this requires extra action economy, but is absolutely worth it for a big battle. Plus, I found that instead of spamming a ton of little ships, I was overall more incentivized to make large fleets and kind of focus my forces in. Because your total fleet capacity is a limiting factor, you can't just build completely massive armies either. Like everything else, it takes an investment, and putting that investment into fleet capacity to build more ships might mean that you don't have as much research, so your technologies are weaker. Because unlike a lot of other 4X games, your research has a capacity based on your science buildings and a few other discoveries that you make, which means you really have to think about what you're going to research. Now, Stellaris Nexus has also only released a demo. There could be other game modes, including some that are more long-form. I don't know the full details, and I purposefully didn't look into it before playing this first impression. But I had a lot of fun with a demo. I guess that isn't surprising because I already enjoyed Stellaris, so I was probably going to have fun with a sequel game as well, but I was surprised at how fresh and new it felt, and how it felt more strategic in a way similar to a card game, rather than something like a real-time strategy or more traditional 4X game. Therefore, I can absolutely recommend the demo if it's still up on Steam when you come across this video. If the demo isn't there, wishlist it, wait for a full release, and find out more when it comes out. Personally, I think it's really cool to see innovation in a genre like 4X. And while Stellaris Nexus may not be as flashy as some of the other recent games I've played, I do think there are a lot of good improvements here. The Empire management feels much better, decisions feel more meaningful, and they've kept the story element without some of the more heavy-handed decision-making that you encounter in the Endless series. It does feel quite different from Stellaris, so I wouldn't quite call it Stellaris 2. I would, however, say that this is a good thing. And so now I'm curious, what are some of your favorite 4X titles? Are you a Civ main? Do you love Master of Orion? Maybe you've tried Humankind and prefer that. Or possibly your favorite 4X game is something I haven't even heard of before. If so, leave some of them down in the comments below. And of course, before I go, a special thanks to my patrons and channel members for the continued support. For as low as $1 a month, you can help fund games, like purchasing Stellaris Nexus when it comes out so I can give it a full review. If you want to see that, link below to help support. If you're looking for something else to watch, I've also released my thoughts on several other indie game demos, including the RPG Hammerwatch 2, the Stardew Valley-like Moonstone Island, a Souls-like called Lies of P, and I'm sure there's more to come, so get subscribed. Or if you want even more game recommendations, check out my recent Steam sale video, where I talked about 5 games you should absolutely check out. And there's always a recommendation on screen if you've seen everything else. But for now, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again sometime soon.